The Fifth Element wasn't just a sci-fi spectacle, it was chaos stitched in couture, a fever dream where flying taxis crashed into opera areas and villains ranted in plastic helmets. But behind the dazzling neon, the production erupted with battles over costumes, collapsing sets, and a script that nearly drowned in its own ambition. Actors fainted inside alien suits, iconic roles were almost cast with completely different faces, and the director himself rewrote not just the story, but his own life. Today, we're unraveling 22 weird facts about The Fifth Element. Some will make you laugh, some might shock you, and one final secret will completely change how you watch the movie. Let's punch in the Multipass and begin. 1. A Teenager's Escape becomes a movie. Luc Besson didn't begin this journey as a filmmaker. He began as a lonely French teenager in a small village, cut off from art and cinema. At 16, he started writing The Fifth Element, not as a screenplay, but as a private escape from the silence around him. He filled notebooks with alien civilizations, secret languages, and characters who felt like friends when real life felt empty. 2 decades later, those sketches became one of the most expensive sci-fi films ever made. What audiences didn't know was that beneath the neon chaos of flying cars and exploding opera houses was still the voice of a lonely boy, writing himself out of isolation. That's why The Fifth Element doesn't feel designed by committee. It feels personal, raw, and strange, because it began as a teenager's lifeline, not a studio mandate. 2. The script was 400 pages long. When most screenplays average around 110 pages, Besson's original draft stretched past 400. It wasn't a movie, it was a trilogy. 3 volumes of politics, mythology, and alien history. He created elaborate species with full languages and religions just to justify props that barely made it on screen. There were galactic councils, warring empires, and love stories that never survived the edit. When the French studio read it, they balked. Too weird, too risky, too expensive. So Besson cut it all down to one leaner story. What we saw in 1997 was only the middle slice of a sprawling universe that still lives in his notebooks. That's why the movie feels at once too big and too small, because we're only seeing fragments of a galaxy that was meant to stretch far beyond 2 hours. 3. Mel Gibson almost flew the taxi before Bruce Willis signed on as Corbin Dallas. The studio had their eye on Mel Gibson. Coming off Braveheart, Gibson was Hollywood royalty, commanding massive box office draw. On paper, he was perfect, rugged, heroic, and bankable. But Luc Besson hesitated. Gibson's energy was brooding, heavy, too grounded for the kaleidoscopic chaos of The Fifth Element. Besson wanted a reluctant hero who could roll his eyes at the absurdity around him, then crack a dry joke in the middle of a firefight. Bruce Willis said, yes, and everything changed. With him, Dallas became not just a soldier, but a sardonic everyman, a man in the wrong place at the wrong time, forced into destiny. With Gibson, the movie might have been darker, cooler, but far less fun. Willis gave it levity, and that levity made the insanity fly. 4. Gary Oldman didn't even read the script. Gary Oldman's villainous Zorg is one of the strangest sci-fi performances of the 1990s, half oil baron, half cartoon demon. But here's the truth. Oldman didn't audition, didn't beg for the role, and barely even read the script. He did it as a personal favor. Years earlier, Besson had financed Neil by Mouth, Oldman's gritty directorial debut. When Besson later called, Oldman simply said yes. He later admitted he didn't understand the story at all. Still, he arrived in plastic helmets and ridiculous accents, improvising a bizarre energy that no one could predict. He hated the movie. Fans loved every second. Sometimes performances aren't born from passion or planning. They're born from debts, favors, and sheer talent. And Oldman, even in a role he never cared for, delivered a villain unforgettable enough to live rent-free in cult cinema history. 5.8 thousand women tried out for Lilu casting. Lilu was a global search. More than 8,000 women auditioned. Some were established stars like Elizabeth Berkley, who came in bold and brash. Others tried futuristic accents or stiff alien grace. None felt right. Then Milla Jovovich walked in. She didn't dominate the room. She didn't even speak loudly. But to Besson, she felt otherworldly. Not French, not American, not from Earth at all. She looked like she belonged to the future, he said. That was the spark. Out of thousands of hopefuls, they chose the one who radiated mystery. And with a few strips of orange straps, she became iconic. What audiences didn't realize was that Lilu wasn't about star power. It was about presence. Jovovich embodied alien purity, and in doing so, turned what could have been a ridiculous role into a timeless sci-fi figure. 6. The diva was the director's wife. In the opera scene, audiences gasped at the blue-skinned diva Plavalaguna. What they didn't know was that under the makeup was Mai Wen, Luc Besson's wife. Tall, striking, and mysterious, she gave the role elegance and gravitas. But as cameras rolled, life off-set shifted. Besson began falling for Milla Jovovich, the newcomer he cast as Lilu. What began as language lessons and late-night script notes grew into something deeper. By the end of production, Besson separated from Mai Wen and was openly with Jovovich. The heartbreak was hidden behind foam prosthetics and soaring vocals, but it lingered. In the final cut, there are two luminous women, one glowing on stage, one radiating in the orange straps of destiny. What audiences didn't see was the private orbit shift happening behind the camera, a director rewriting not just his film, but his life. 7. The alien language became a love language. Lilu's strange tongue wasn't gibberish, it was real. Besson invented the divine language, a fully constructed alien vocabulary of over 400 words. Jovovich took it seriously, memorizing and mastering the phonetics until it rolled off her tongue with authenticity. Soon, their collaboration spilled into their relationship. They used the language for private notes, secret whispers, even love letters no one else could read. It became their secret code, spoken between scenes and scribbled in margins. That intimacy bled into the performance, making Lilu's alien speech feel alive, not scripted. Most audiences assumed it was nonsense. In reality, it was one of the most personal elements of the entire production, a fictional tongue transformed into an intimate connection. What started as world-building ended as a hidden love story, now preserved forever in every syllable Lilu utters on screen. 8. Milla Jovovich fought without a double. When Lilu launches into her explosive corridor fight, audiences assume it's CGI or a double in a wig. But it wasn't. Jovovich performed nearly every move herself. She trained in martial arts, wire work, and high-speed choreography, determined to embody the role. Punches, flips, and kicks, all hers. During takes, she endured bruises, exhaustion, and repeated stunts until the shots felt authentic. She wanted Lilu to bleed, to fall, to fight like a real weapon, one crew member recalled. What audiences didn't know is that her determination pushed her into the realm of genuine action hero, decades before Hollywood embraced women-led fight choreography. The result? A performance that felt alive, not fake, not digital, raw, human, and fierce. Jovovich didn't just play the perfect being, she became it, sweat, grit, and all. And that's why her fight scenes still hold up today. 9th, Zorg's gun nearly burned the set. When Zorg unveils his all-in-one superweapon, it looks like pure sci-fi nonsense, but at least one part was real, the flamethrower. The prop department built a working version, complete with live fire jets. During testing, the flame shot too high, licking across the ceiling and nearly torching the set. Crew scrambled, fire extinguishers hissed, and panic filled the studio. No one was hurt, but it was a warning. This movie was not playing it safe. Besson loved it. He wanted danger, unpredictability, the sense that even props had teeth. What audiences didn't realize was that the gun was more than a gimmick. It was a hazard, a weapon meant for spectacle, but one that carried real flames capable of destroying everything around it. In The Fifth Element, even the props were volatile, blurring the line between imagination and physical danger. 10. The alien suits were death traps. The Mondoshawan aliens in the film's opening move slowly, their hulking bodies filling the temple corridor. But their pace wasn't a creative choice, it was survival. Each suit weighed over 80 pounds, made of thick foam with almost no ventilation. Actors inside staggered beneath the weight, heat building with every second. At one point, a performer collapsed from heat exhaustion and had to be dragged out mid-scene, rehydrated and stabilized. They finished, but barely. What looked like deliberate alien choreography was actually desperation, one step at a time, praying not to faint. Besson wanted majesty, but what the cast endured bordered on brutal. For the actors, it wasn't science fiction pageantry. It was heat stroke disguised as art. What audiences didn't know is that some of the film's most majestic moments were filmed under the threat of collapse. If you're loving these strange behind-the-scenes secrets, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next set of facts will make you look at this cult classic in a completely different light. 11. Ruby Rod. Couldn't sit down. Ruby Rod is pure chaos, leopard print, shrieking energy, and a microphone that feels like a weapon. But the weirdest part wasn't the performance, it was the costume. Jean-Paul Gaultier designed Ruby's outfits to be outrageous and unforgettable, but they were also brutally impractical. One weighed nearly 50 pounds, with a rigid spine that locked Chris Tucker's body in place. He couldn't bend forward, couldn't sit in a chair, and could barely breathe. Between takes, he leaned against walls or stood in corners, sweating through fabric and makeup. Yet none of that discomfort shows on screen. Tucker turned pain into performance, bouncing and screeching with kinetic energy that defined the film. What audiences didn't realize was that Ruby's flamboyant movements weren't just character choices. They were survival. Chaos incarnate, powered by a costume that refused to let him rest. 12. The Divas explosion was real. When the Divas Opera Hall explodes into chaos, audiences assume it's CGI trickery, but it wasn't. That detonation was practical, a full-scale explosion executed inside a real structure. At the time, it was the largest indoor blast ever filmed. Dozens of cameras captured the moment from every angle. Walls collapsed, debris rained down, and fire marshals stood ready in case things went wrong. They had one chance. No resets, no second takes. When it went off, the result was pure cinematic mayhem, flawless destruction immortalized on film. What audiences didn't know is that everyone on set held their breath that day. One mistake and the entire sequence would be lost, or worse, dangerous. The opera scene isn't just spectacle. It's a testament to practical effects, risk, and the willingness to gamble everything for one unforgettable shot. 13. The hero and villain never meet. Corbin Dallas and Zorg, Bruce Willis and Gary Oldman are the central hero and villain of the story. But here's the strange twist. They never meet. Not once, not even by accident. Their paths circle one another, ripple through each other's actions, but never collide face to face. This wasn't an accident, it was Besson's deliberate choice. He wanted a story where good and evil battled indirectly, where the villain's reach mattered more than his presence. It broke one of storytelling's oldest rules, the climactic showdown. And yet, it worked. The tension stayed high, the stakes felt real, and the structure itself became unforgettable. What audiences didn't know is that the absence of a showdown made the movie stranger, but also more original. Sometimes the most powerful enemy is the one you never even see in the flesh. 14. Sci-fi in full daylight. Science fiction films usually hide their flaws in shadows. Corridors are dim, ships are metallic, and battles take place in dark voids. Not here. Besson wanted the future to shine. He lit the fifth element in blinding clarity, taxi chases under blue skies, firefights in sterile white corridors, explosions against glowing clouds. It was a massive risk. Every costume, every effect, every detail had to withstand the scrutiny of daylight. No murkiness to hide mistakes. But the result was bold, different, and unforgettable. What audiences didn't know is that this choice broke one of sci-fi's unwritten rules. By making the future bright, Besson created a world that felt alive and unapologetic. Not dystopia, but delirium. In a genre obsessed with shadows, the fifth element dared to shine, and that's why it still looks unlike anything else. 15. Prince was almost Ruby Rhod. Before Chris Tucker stole the movie, Ruby Rhod was meant for royalty. Prince. Besson envisioned the role with him in mind. The voice, the gender-bending charisma, the fearless energy. Prince was intrigued. He read the script, liked the concept, and initially said yes. But then he saw Gautier's costume sketches. Lace, mesh, plunging necklines, heels that defied gravity. And even Prince, known for outrageous fashion, said no. Too feminine, he decided. He walked away, leaving Besson scrambling. Chris Tucker, younger and more frantic, took over. He infused Ruby with Michael Jackson's moves and manic speed, transforming the character into a scream machine. What audiences didn't realize is that the role was designed for someone else. Somewhere in an alternate timeline, Ruby Rhod is played by Prince. But in ours, Tucker turned it into pure cult cinema electricity. 16. Booed at Cannes, loved by fans. When The Fifth Element premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, the reception was brutal. Critics scoffed, calling it shallow, silly, too loud. Booing echoed in the theater. What was supposed to be Luc Besson's masterpiece was mocked as neon nonsense. But while critics dismissed it, audiences embraced it. Young moviegoers quoted Ruby Rhod, obsessed over Lilu's hair, and replayed the Divas opera scene endlessly. Slowly, the bad reviews faded. But the fandom grew louder. Over time, the film wasn't remembered as a flop, it was remembered as a cult triumph. What audiences didn't know was that this movie, once laughed at by critics, survived because of passion, not approval. The Fifth Element proved that sometimes critics don't crown the classics. Fans do. What was booed in Cannes became beloved in bedrooms, rewound on VHS tapes until the colors bled neon. 17. 1,000 costumes, one designer. Most films outfit their leads and fill the background with rented wardrobe. Not here. Besson hired fashion legend Jean-Paul Gaultier to dress the entire galaxy. Gaultier didn't just design a few iconic looks, he built over 1,000 costumes by hand. Every alien race, every taxi driver, every background extra had a unique outfit. Flight attendants wore skin-tight neoprene corsets. Police dressed like nightclub bouncers from another planet. Even characters glimpsed for seconds were clad in couture. It wasn't just costuming, it was world-building through fabric, stitching culture into silhouette. What audiences didn't know was that this level of detail nearly collapsed the wardrobe department. It was fashion as infrastructure, a universe sewn seam by seam, and it worked. With one glance at any frame, you knew. This wasn't just sci-fi, it was science fiction dressed to kill. 18. Spaceships inspired by pyramids. The Mondoshawan ships in the opening sequence look mythic, heavy, and strangely familiar. That was intentional. Besson and his designers rooted the ships in Egyptian temple geometry, rounded tops, thick bases, proportions drawn from sun worship carvings. The implication wasn't subtle. Maybe aliens didn't just visit Earth. Maybe they were the pyramids. By tying futuristic design to ancient myth, the film fused the spiritual past with a chaotic future. It wasn't just technology. It was religion wrapped in metal. What audiences didn't know was that these shapes were meant as secret symbols, a bridge between time and myth. In The Fifth Element, even the ships carried hidden meaning. They weren't just vehicles, they were sacred structures adrift in space, reminders that the story of humanity and the story of the cosmos might always have been connected. 19th miniatures, not CGI. The dizzying cityscapes of flying cars weaving through skyscrapers look like digital wizardry. But in 1997, CGI wasn't up to the task. Instead, the team built miniature models, dozens of detailed towers, tiny roads, neon lights, and filmed them with motion control cameras, the same technique pioneered by Star Wars. Then they layered in digital effects to extend the illusion. The result was seamless, tactile, and alive. What audiences didn't know is that these cities weren't computer files. They were physical objects, hand-built with painstaking detail. That's why the future of The Fifth Element feels so textured, so real. It wasn't pixels, it was models you could touch, lit and filmed, like miniature worlds. Even in a movie bursting with flamboyant imagination, the future was still built by hand, proving old-school craftsmanship could rival even the wildest digital dreams. 20th, a French movie filmed in English. Though it was funded by French studios and directed by a French visionary, The Fifth Element was shot entirely in English, not for style, for survival. Besson knew that a film this strange, this expensive, needed global reach. So he cast American stars, hired British crews, and filmed at Pinewood Studios in London. At the time, it was the most expensive movie France had ever produced, but it was dressed in the language of blockbusters. What audiences didn't know was that this choice wasn't artistic, it was strategic. By speaking English, the film secured international distribution and box office power. It was a French dream disguised as Hollywood spectacle. In doing so, The Fifth Element pulled off a trick few films manage. It was both defiantly French and unmistakably global, a cultural hybrid wrapped in neon chaos. 21. Bruce Willis. Almost walked away. Even after signing on, Bruce Willis wasn't fully sold. The script was chaotic, the costumes wild, and the tone unlike any blockbuster he'd done. On set, tensions sometimes flared between Willis and Besson, with the star frustrated by long hours and unconventional directing. At one point, he considered leaving the project, but Besson fought to keep him, insisting only Willis could balance the absurdity with grounded humor. The gamble paid off. Willis' dry wit, weary charm, and exasperated delivery became the film's anchor. What audiences didn't know was how close The Fifth Element came to losing its star. Without Willis, Corbin Dallas might have been a brooding warrior played straight. With him, he became a reluctant, wisecracking hero. And that balance is what made the film's madness digestible. Chaos grounded by a single, exhausted taxi driver. 22. Chris Tucker's voice. Nearly broke sound mixers. Ruby Rod's voice wasn't just loud, it was deafening. On set, Tucker's shrieks were so high-pitched that the sound team struggled to capture them cleanly. His improvisations spiked microphones, distorted recordings, and forced engineers to rebalance tracks. Some takes were unusable because the audio simply clipped beyond repair. Yet Besson encouraged Tucker to push further, insisting that Ruby's sonic chaos was part of the spectacle. What audiences didn't know was that the sound department worked overtime to rein in the performance without killing its manic edge. Ruby wasn't just visually flamboyant, he was orally overwhelming, a character so loud he nearly broke the film's technical foundation. And still, Tucker's voice became iconic, a screech that fans quote to this day. The fact that engineers barely survived the recording process only adds to the madness of his unforgettable performance. Bonus fact: Multipass became digital immortality. It was never meant to be a catchphrase, just a throwaway line, delivered by Jovovich in broken English. Lilu Dallas Multipass. But it stuck. Audiences repeated it, quoted it, and turned it into a meme before memes even existed. The word has since appeared in video games like Borderlands and Cyberpunk 2077. Sly winks to fans who remember. What audiences didn't know was how deeply it infiltrated pop culture. A single line, mispronounced and repeated, became shorthand for the film itself. Too strange, too funny, too unforgettable to ignore. Today, Multipass lives on not just as dialogue, but as a digital legacy, proving that sometimes the smallest moments become the loudest echoes. The fifth element wasn't neat, it wasn't safe, it was too bright, too French, too strange. Critics didn't know what to do with it, but fans did. They clung to the chaos, rewound the opera, memorized the lines, and built a cult around its neon madness. What began as a lonely teenager's escape became a global fever dream, stitched together with fashion, risk, and fire.